Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders in rolling out zero trust architectures. With me on today's show are Matt Connor, Chief Information Security Officer, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Tanya Manning, Director and Chief Information Security Officer at EPA, Gerald Karen, Chief Information Officer, Health and Human Services, Office of the Inspector General, Paul Caspian, Principal Product Manager, Zero Trust Palo Alto Networks, Akiba Saidi, Vice President IBM Security Federal, and Tony D'Angelo, Vice President U.S. Public Sector Lookout. Well, the executive order has been out for over a year. Of course, SolarWinds even before that. And this panel recognizes that this is a journey and you've been on it for several years. Matt, let's start with you. Give us the state of zero trust across the intelligence community.
Thanks, and good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I'd characterize the state of zero trust right now as maturing. As you say, the executive order enshrined the imperatives to adopt a zero trust architecture. Most of the community members were already moving in that direction. The subsequent National Security Memorandum released in January of 2022 further codified the intent for the federal government and national security system operators to adopt zero trust principles. We've been working on this for a while, as you might suspect. From the IC CISO view, one of the things we've been working on is our implementation plan to overhaul cyber across the community. And we built the building blocks into the implementation plan to lay the groundwork for quickly accelerating to zero trust outcomes.
It really is a framework and architecture building blocks, right? It's a journey that we're all on. Tanya, tell us the state about what's happening at EPA.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting this forum. It's very informative. I appreciate sharing and hearing from my colleagues, so I'm looking forward to learning today. But as you mentioned, Luke, and EPA recognizes that zero trust architecture and the principles underneath it and getting there is definitely a journey. It is not a sprint. And we did kind of set off sprinting, right? So requirements are issued and you have 60 or 120 or 90 days to implement. So we were sprinting, but we took a step back and recognized that is actually a journey. And then looking at many of the implementation strategies that we'd already put in place, so we started the journey early on, aligning to the risk management framework and aligning to the minimum standards established by FISMA. So we recognized that we needed a good, strong foundation. We very quickly adopted the CDM model, and we implemented starting with identity and verification, identifying the assets and the people that were on our network, which was one of the things that keeps me up at night, right? If I don't know who's on the network and what devices and what they're doing, then that's a challenge for us. So we quickly moved to implement continuous monitoring and identity and access management solutions to give us some sense of what was going on in our network. So we did move forward with multi-factor authentication for our employees, as well as virtual smart cards for temporary visitors and guests, just to make sure we had a strong hold on who they were and a strong hold on their authorization to our environment. We also focused on data. Right. So we're protecting systems. A lot of times in IT, we focus on systems and network, but we also had to put some fundamental protections to safeguard our data. So we deployed encryption technologies. We also deployed some solutions to help with identifying and encrypting our data, as well as preventing the inadvertent release of data, right? So we put some data loss prevention protections in the environment also. One of the things we recognize being a research organization is that we have to spend time protecting and safeguarding our laboratory equipment. So we focused on looking at Internet of Things policies and procedures, something that is fairly new to us, right? So we're reaching out across the space to learn more about securing those environments. And we're also focused on bringing those environments into the enterprise fold. Right now, to protect the integrity of the information, a lot of those environments are isolated. So how do we bring those into the enterprise fold and get visibility into making sure we're able to address any vulnerabilities there? We also migrated to cloud, right? Cloud adoption. So in a sense, the zero trust strategy brought a lot of previous requirements together and helped us with a clear focus and direction to get us toward our zero trust architecture.
Right. Really puts a framework together that you can take these Lego blocks and start kind of snapping them in. And as far as, following a structure and an architecture, no doubt you have a lot of interaction with the scientific community, et cetera. I'm sure that gets a little tricky. And I know that at HHS, there's a tremendous amount of interaction outside of the human and health services as far as interaction with various health communities, et cetera. Gerald, why don't you tell us about the state, about what's happening in your domain in regards to the zero trust journey?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. So I before the executive order even came out, when I arrived here, I introduced zero trust to the staff. So it was an education to be had. And I find that across the federal government, there's still education to be had around zero trust. But the approach was to take a functional capabilities model that we had, about 50 or so functional capabilities. We inventoried that because we wanted to make the most of our investment and see what we were doing well, what we needed to work on, as well as where our gaps were or what we need to do a lot more work on. So from that, we were able to gauge what we needed, where we were doing good, and then we were able to start identifying projects to fill those gaps. So we understood where our as-is was and what that journey needs to be in between for all 5 of the pillars. In doing so, we've set out on 5 foundational projects. That's integrating a lot of the telemetry we have, because we'll need that to make decisions on, doing data mapping so we can understand where the data flow is going, where the data resides as well, so we can get that baseline. We putting in a SOC as a service, so getting that monitoring in place 24/7 was very important. We're also looking at what we call a secure web gateway, or a SASE, so we can send our users more direct to their destination, it being cloud and internet usually, rather than having to boomerang them back through a tick. And we are also maturing our identity management program and making sure that we have some legacy applications that contribute to that today, but we want to make it more sustainable and more mature. So from those 5 projects, we'll be able to jump off as stepping stones into the rest of the roadmap and the pillars that we have inventoried, but we want to make the most of our investments. So, we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of telemetry already, so we want to make the most of that going forward.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot about, hey, look, there's a lot of tools and capabilities already in place, and we just simply need to configure them way into this framework, unlock them. Paul, no doubt you get a lot of those calls. You've seen a lot of this sort of striped across the various sectors and the various agencies. Tell us sort of, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, I think last year with the executive order, obviously, there was a lot of visibility and urgency around zero trust, but one thing that was lacking, I think, was kind of clarity around where to start, how expansive zero trust initiatives should be. I think the OMB memo earlier this year obviously provided some very prescriptive guidance on sort of the different requirements that organizations should think about. And, as a company, Palo Alto Networks, we spend a lot of time with groups like NIST and the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, helping to figure out really prescriptive guides to how to take security tools that folks are using in their environments and use them to do zero trust, essentially. I think there's been a bit of a gap between sort of what people know they need to do and how to go do that. But I think there's a lot more clarity now, a lot more urgency, obviously, and we've just been spending a lot of time with customers, helping them navigate that, really.
There's no question that the White House loves their sprints, and so I think sprints are important. They're lazy. I can get away with saying that now. There's no question that they get the community laser focused, but I think Tanya pointed out it is a journey, and you have to be thoughtful about the moves you're going to make. Akiba, I'm sure you're seeing this from a various multi-dimensional standpoint. Give us your point of view, IBM's point of view, what you're seeing out there across the community.
Yeah, thank you, Luke, and really appreciate being here. And really, I think everything I've heard so far from everyone that's spoken is very consistent with a lot of what we've been hearing and seeing as well. I'll give you one data point That's a bit more of a global data point to sort of see how are we against the rest of the world. We just released last week our cost of a data breach report, which is done by an independent group, but studies 550 breaches across 17 industries, across 17 countries. And one of the things that started to be measured last year was zero trust implementations. And this year again. So one of the data points there in that report was that zero trust implementations were up 35 to 41%. So there definitely is progress moving towards that direction. And that those that are doing zero trust have about $1 million of savings against the breaches that they are incurring. I think one of the other points of progress, and I'm really happy to hear most of everyone speaking today, there's the journey, not the destination. I think there was a lot of confusion introduced into the market with, hey, you implement this tool and you will have zero trust in some amount of time. That is, I think we're getting to the point now where, that's just not the accepted approach anymore. And the principles of least privilege, verify continuously, and assume breach, which also the cost of a data breach report absolutely verified, 83% of the organizations that have not just one breach, but experiencing multiple breaches, right? So there's no not having a breach. It is how do you now detect, respond, and most effectively mitigate. And so the adoption of the zero trust principles helps everyone sort of along that journey. I do think there's definitely been a lot of us working with organizations to translate from that buzzword of zero trust, because it has kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own, to practical roadmaps. And all the dimensions of what have already been described in all the pillar areas are true. I think one of the things we have really seen is the less about the tools, more about the governance, the people, the process, and a lot about the culture and the alignment with the business side, the administration side, and what the impacts are for the end users. We spend a lot of time working with organizations through some of those issues, because some of those become the roadblocks more than the technology and how things actually get implemented. So I will, I'll sort of leave it there for now.
Thank you. And the last time we had a zero trust topic on, culture was brought up as well. And I think you're right. You quickly get past the speeds and the feeds and the specific technologies into, okay, well, what is this capability going to unlock, so to speak? Tony at Lookout, Lookout back in the day dominated the mobile space, and then very quickly have now grown into much more than that. And just in time, I might add. So Tony, tell us about, from your perspective, from Lookout's perspective, what are you seeing across the public sector?
Yeah, good afternoon, Luke. Good to be with you. Yeah, great question. So you're right. Our roots are in mobile security, and with the expansion of our business into cloud security and SASE, as was mentioned earlier with some of the other folks, it is perfect timing. What we're seeing from the agencies is very consistent with what I've heard today. I think generally most people, because this notion of zero trust is so transformational. It's not as simple as go evaluate the technology and make some acquisitions and then begin to implement. I think we're seeing folks take their time. There's this process of assessing where they are, learning what the zero trust elements are and how that fits into their organization. And then I think the most important thing, and what I'm pleased to say, that with all the agencies that we've been talking to, we're trying to act as a trusted advisor and share what we believe are the proper ways to address this. And we see people doing just that, where they're looking at this whole problem holistically and putting together a wide scale plan that includes endpoint, the mobile endpoint, all the way up to including cloud security, within this thought process of continuous conditional access, all the pieces and parts. So we're encouraged by what we're seeing. Again, I think it's so transformational and it's such a big undertaking that it would be a mistake if people were to leap forward and begin to start making quick acquisitions on pieces and parts of technology and expect that it's all going to fit together later. One of the things that we're trying to educate on as well is, where possible, particularly where there's policies, security policies that can be put in place, try to acquire as many of those different solutions from the same vendors to minimize policy overlap or underlap, because that's going to be critical from the not only the end user's experience, but the IT administrator's experience and how to manage this whole process. And as you mentioned with mobile, I think partly not only has mobile been growing, and roughly 70% of all internet traffic goes through a mobile device today, but the desire to access government assets with mobile devices continues to increase. COVID has certainly increased that. Telework is not going away, so that need to treat mobile as any other endpoint and secure it is going to be critical. And then also, as the pandemic wanes, we're seeing return to travel. So that means free Wi-Fi, and then trying to access again some of these networks out in the public forum with little to no security. So again, back to continuous conditional access: trust no device, trust no network, trust no user, and it's not a single log on and everything is fine. It's just this notion that we're continuously testing and evaluating behavior analytics, right? There's so many pieces that go into this. So very pleased to see what we're seeing from the agencies, and they certainly have more work to do, but it's a big undertaking. And I think it's going to take a couple more years before everybody is really comfortable and executes where they need to be.
Sounds like a great report. Gerald, you came in hot over there, so to speak, and spent a lot of time focusing on apparently education in respect to what a zero trust framework would look like, then started to build. Give us an example of a program, a specific piece of that you'd like to highlight that is really took off, let's say.
Yeah, one of the things we're working on is a proof of concept for doing our data mapping to understand what that normal looks like. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to protect data. Some people will say, they focus on the identity, which is very important. But, if you got compromised and I was a cybersecurity analyst, first thing I'm probably going to ask is, what did you have access to? And is there exfil? So, it does become about the data at the end of the day, what I'm trying to protect. But I need to know where that data is and where that data is going to kind of get that baseline. So when something does happen that's not normal, I can kind of take that appropriate action in real time as possible. So definitely automation is going to come into play as we go on our zero trust journey here. So that's something that I think that's very important. Another thing that we have done is we've educated our user base. I call them our fans, and I want to make them part of the team. So as part of our fans, when I call them our fans, I kind of think of the football. We got the people working, playing on the field, which are making zero trust happen. We got the sidelines, the project managers, program managers. We got the C-suite, who's making sure that the team has resources that it needs and the priorities. But we do this for our fans. So that we're not just making this like an IT problem where we're back in our IT shop in our Frankenstein lab, creating security and going to throw it out there. We're actually asking them, what do they need access to? When do they need access? And how do they want to be able to access it? Not how do they do it necessarily, but how do they want, so we can build those requirements in. So we're educating them on zero trust. There's going to be this journey. Things are probably going to change, but we're going to try to bring you benefits as well, like send you more direct, but still, have our security in place rather than boomeranging you to a data center and sending you back out. Very inefficient. More seamless movement between platforms, data to the right people at the right time when they need it. Make sure that that data has its integrity. But also we need from them, what data do they need access to? Where is that data? What applications are they using most to access that data? How do they want to do it? So we can build in those requirements. And then what we get is we get easier adoption because we're building this in for them. So we've already started early education. They may not be seeing the effects of anything we're doing yet necessarily, but they are aware that things are going to happen and they may change. So we are buying them in early so that they can be participants, and basically they need to be part of the team because that's the mission we support.
Love the fan base approach and the cooperation and collaboration there. Excellent approach there. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.